Horrendous Sunday to sit and spend my entire day watching New York Metropolitan baseball. How's it going, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we got a lot of breakdown in tonight's post-game segment, as not only did the Mets lose Game 1 of the doubleheader by a final score of 6-5, a one-run differential, but they come to lose Game 2 and this series entirely against the Cardinals in St. Louis here by a final score of 5-4. We're going to recap and break down everything that transpired in both ball games today, as much as that pains me to say, because so much did not go in the Mets' favor today. They were roping baseballs left, right, and center. Juan Soto's trying to hit dead center bombs. He's absolutely robbed by the Gold Glove and Mr. Victor Scott II. We see Brandon Nimmo ripping liners to right, and he's getting absolutely robbed left, right, and center. Pop-ups in the infield. We get Nolan Arenado and Lars Nootbaar tumbling there into the stands. They're making Gold Glove catches left, right, and center, and this Mets team leaves over 20 batters on base, was once again horrendous, absolutely horrendous, with runners in scoring position. And on top of it all, everybody, the umpire, especially in Game 1, was so unbelievably god-awful that he made Helen Keller look like she knew what she was doing if she was back there calling balls and strikes. Just an absolute shit show on all facets of this one. And I apologize in advance for some of the profanity, but I'm pretty pissed off right now. It's hard not to be for the Mets to lose a series in this fashion, because on one hand, it's like, okay, the Mets are losing close ball games. They're grinding it out until the very end, and that's what we could say about Game 1 of the two-game loss today. But in Game 2, it's not like the Mets rallied after being down by a lot of runs. They came, they got the lead, they were up 4-2, they blew it when they had so much opportunity to, in fact, just add some insurance. That is yet again the story of this Mets team, everybody. We can nitpick the umpires as much as we want. We can nitpick so many guys that are, again, taking called strike 3, especially whether it's Vientos, whether it's Soto, whether it's Alonso, where, again, it was still a borderline strike. Nick the corner is what it is from Game 1 on the slider. There's just so much to take away from this series and to be so frustrated by, especially as now the Mets have to get set to head over west to face the Arizona Diamondbacks there in Arizona, as the Diamondbacks did, in fact, win today after the Phillies try to rally all the way back in their matchup. Diamondbacks salvaged their series today with an 11-9 win. Thankfully, their bullpen was really worked, so we'll see if the Mets can expose that more in this upcoming series beginning tomorrow. But, I mean, are you serious right now? It's one thing to drop one game by one run. It's another to now drop two. And then on top of it all, everybody, as Daniel Caps is saying here in the show, it's 1,000% true. The Mets are now below 500 over their past 10 games. And when we take a look at the losses from the Mets, when we look at the Washington Nationals series, when we look at the Arizona Diamondbacks series, when we look at this series, what is the commonality? It's the same nonsense, game after game after game. Every single loss the Mets have had so far this year has been, for the most part, the same. Either they were losing, rallied back, and then, unfortunately, they get exposed here with runners in scoring position late in the game, whether it's vice versa, and again, they get exposed towards the end. It's one thing or another, but the commonality has been that the Mets have not been able to hit a lick, with that one exception of that 19-5 win against the Washington Nationals. The Mets have been absolutely horrendous with runners in scoring position, and that needs to be further emphasized today, because we can sit here and nitpick a lot of individual things, and we're going to do that, but don't get it twisted. It starts and ends with the Mets not getting enough done on the offensive end when they had endless opportunities to do so. Pat W., thank you so much for the donation, Pat. Pat says, blah, this is going to be a long month if things don't change with Arizona, Chicago, Yanks, Red Sox, also Dodgers in the next couple weeks. Yeah, the Mets have an absolute gauntlet here in the month of May. So trust me when I tell you that I'm not happy to be breaking down a second consecutive series loss versus what should have been a series victory for this Mets team, especially on doubleheaders. The Mets getting swept on a doubleheader is so uncommon. These things do not typically happen, but this is what I have to tell you, everybody. This is what I have to get into. We have so much to break down in this matchup, because on top of it all, just when things get bad, they get worse. Danny Young has been officially placed on the long-term injured list. He's out for the entire season, as after he got his second opinion, he's in fact getting Tommy John surgery. Then you add in, okay, the Mets have a doubleheader, so let's give Jesse Winker a start in the corner outfield, and then let's give Starling Marte a corner outfield start the game after. Both exited their respective games early due to injury, with Jesse Winker, he has a side issue. They are concerned it's an oblique, which is terrible to hear because obliques are finical, and they are not something that's necessarily going to heal up right away. You can't rush them. Shamania tried, and he had himself a setback in his rehab. In the case of Starling Marte, we await word to hear what's going to happen on Marte's front. So if you guys hear from Carlos Mendoza in his postgame presser at any point throughout the live show, please relay it my way as we're trying to find out what's happening with Starling Marte. And you know what even grinds my gears even more? You know, out of all the opportunities they had when Diaz could have pitched for the Mets in a one-run ball game, twice over the previous series, we decide to bring him in today as the Mets still lose this ball game. 5-4 is the final, and he comes in a non-safe situation because he had to get him in. First time he's pitching in 8 days. It's almost like he should have been utilized the series prior when it made endless sense to do so. But I digress, everybody. We got a lot to get into between Blade Tidwell having a less than ideal rookie debut, along with Tyler McGill not having his best stuff, and a Mets offense that, as I allude to plenty, just cannot get the job done. That is what's led us to the discussion that we're having right here, right now. But folks, before I do a roll call to everyone in the live show and to everybody, I just want to say thank you guys kindly for smashing that like and subscribe button on your way in. And this is event session, folks. Let it all out there. By all means, I know the sky is not falling. The boys still have a strong record, and I'm still not overly concerned on the team as of now, but yes, things are getting exposed, and we're seeing it further exposed. I would love to hear everyone's thoughts, whether they're overreactionary, whether they're balanced, whether they're level-headed. Rest assured, everybody, please relay them in the chat right here, right now. And once more, I want to give a big shout out to our awesome friends here at SeatGeek that have you covered for all your sports betting needs. And I actually apologize to everybody. Not SeatGeek. We're going to run it back one more time. Shout out to my awesome friends that, yes, we do have SeatGeek with our promo code WARDY10 link down below, but let's also shout out BetUS that has you covered with all of your sports betting needs. Head over to betus.com.pa today. Should you guys have interest in betting? If you don't, that's fine. Don't bother. And if you do, make sure you bet responsibly. That's the most important thing. But they have you covered all the latest odds, picks, lines, you name it. And BetUS right now has the Mets at over or under 96.5 wins on the season. Now, I'm going to be honest, folks, unless the Mets can start to churn out victories in these one-run ball games, it's going to be hard to envision them getting close to 96 wins on the season, right? I see this team being a 90-plus win team. As of now, they're still on pace to have 100 wins on the season, but still, they got to get things figured out there. These runner and scoring position woes continue, and I don't love it. So if you guys want to hammer this over or under, feel free to do so at betus.com.pa today and use our amazing promo code YouTube150. That way, you two get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, 125 on your second and your third for whatever you guys have interest in the betting space. And once more, make sure you guys bet responsibly. Shout out once more to BetUS. Greg, thank you so much for the donation. Greg says 6 for 26 with runners to scoring position. Yeah, it's not going to get the job done, Greg. It's a major problem. Steve, thank you so much for the $5 haul. I appreciate that a lot. The bats did not step up, but historically, McGill has only pitched well in April, and he has an ERA north of 5 in other months. While that is true, Steve, today's start isn't as much, I think, on Tyler as it still is with this Mets team, not contributing enough with runners in scoring position. I certainly see the point, though. Thank you kindly for that donation and the breakdown there. We got Juliet, great member of the chat. We got Anthony, how we doing? Great member. Lillian, how we doing? Robert, Jose, going up the list. We got Mike Norton, No Name, how we doing? Rocket, we got Giovanni, KCB, Always Froza, Dwayne, how we doing? Stefan, how we doing? Jason, Juliet, if I didn't say already. Brandon, great member, how we doing? Daniel Caps, great member, how we doing? Yoshima, thank you so much for the $5 holla. Yoshima says, Cardinals are actually the luckiest team ever. Garbage organization. They didn't deserve this luck after forcing the Mets to get into Arizona super late. I tend to agree, but sadly, we are dealing with the cards that were dealt, and we lost these games. No pun intended. Maxwell, how we doing? Chad O'Neill, great member. John R, going up the list here further. Aaron Jacobs, great member. Casey, how we doing? Gabe, how we doing? Chris Lanes, how we doing? The Gray Ghost, how we doing? Brandon, how we doing? Dan, how we doing? Great member. Going up the list here. Daniel said you already. Madeline, Brian, James, how we doing? Ryan, great member. Everybody and your mother, thank you guys kindly for chiming in. Let's break down this ball game and let's get into what did not work in the Mets' favor in this very frustrating matchup. I do have an update here on Jesse Winker and possibly Starling Marte, so let's see what Mendoza had to say. Mendoza says that the Mets will get more imaging, and it looks like an IL situation, so there you go. So the Mets' fear of Jesse Winker being placed on the injured list with an oblique injury is becoming a reality, everybody. So Jesse Winker, do not expect to see him for the next 2 to 3 weeks at minimum is what we're looking like, so that really pisses me off. Winker was having some better at-bats as of late, too. And, of course, how fitting, regardless on how it happened, How fitting is it that both Starling Marte and Jesse Winker go down with apparent injury on the first days all season long that they play the corner outfield? Now we know we certainly don't have corner outfield options in either, to say the least. McBlam with a $10 holla. Thank you so much. McBlam says, is it a lack of clutch hitting when they hit the heck out of the ball and they are getting robbed nearly every time? I get game one, but game two is not the same. Feels wrong to judge both games the same. Here's the thing. It's impossible not to judge both games the same when the robberies that happened to the Mets in that one singular inning that we saw there in game two on Soto and then Nimmo doesn't explain the excuses for all the other innings. At the end of the day, the Mets put runners on base basically every single inning, what felt like both games today. And they were only able to produce in very limited sample sizes. And that's on them. You know, bad luck or not, because the Mets had a lot of bad luck on their side today. In game one, in their 6-5 loss, they had an expected batting average of 264. In game two, they had an expected batting average of 323. So they absolutely got batted the hell out of this one, and it's very unfortunate, but they still need to produce better than what they did. I think that can be said just from everything that we're going to relay here in just a second, everybody. So we'll see what happens on the Starling Marte front. Still awaiting word to hear an update on him right now. All I'm getting right. Oh, there is no injury for Marte. That's fantastic. So dial it back. That is at least a plus. Okay. No injury for Starling Marte exited today's game. It was part of the plan, Carlos Mendoza said, who hadn't played the outfield yet this season. So, okay. So you mean to tell me that instead of trying maybe keep Marte in the ball game, maybe putting Soto back out to right field, and maybe shifting Marte to DH, we instead take Starling Marte out for the remainder of the ball game when Marte was the biggest offensive weapon for game two in the doubleheader today for Jose Azcar. Can someone enlighten me? Are you not able to swap DH and corner outfield halfway through the game? If you can't, then okay, I get it a little bit more because Marte hasn't played the outfield at all this season. But it's the one guy that actually clutched up, that started clutch up for you with offense in game two of the doubleheader today. And you pull him early? Like, why not just put Soto back in right and have him and Marte flip? Are they not? I'm pretty sure you can do that, right? Again, I'm not an expert. You can do that. Again, I'm almost certain you can do that. So I just don't understand why that wouldn't be the first thing you think of if you're Carlos Mendoza. Because what is the difference going to be if Juan Soto has to play the final 4 or 5 innings in right field? You know what I mean? Like, there's a reality that he was going to start both games today. You lose DH if you do that, Wardy? Okay. See, if you do that, then that makes more sense, Carlos. But do you lose DH even if you just flip them with guys that are actively in the lineup playing at the same time? I can understand losing DH if you're in a situation where a guy, if you take DH away and there's a guy coming off the bench, you lose your DH. Okay, all right. Again, I trust you guys. That's why I'm asking, because I genuinely don't know the exact answer to it. So if you do, in fact, lose a DH, then that makes more sense behind the decision because you want to prioritize defense. But see how the Mets lost by 1 run today? And you see how Starling Marte and Francisco Alvarez were like the only batters in the second half of this doubleheader today that were able to hit with runners in scoring position and 2 out. Like, that's where the lack of feel for the game comes in at times with Mendoza, and it genuinely bothers me because Mendy has been great in the past, so we've seen on favoring the hot hand with bats by even keeping Jesse Winker in a ball game at times to face both righty and lefties because he's really swinging the bat well, and it's worked. We've seen him keep a pitcher in for any longer. It's worked many situations because the pitcher was like, I got this, don't worry. But that's personally something where Mendoza said post-game that it was a part of the pregame plan. I don't care if that was part of the pregame plan. You need to have the in-game feel. That's like the same nonsense as saying that, oh yeah, well, it's justified to pull Blake Snell early in the World Series because that was our pregame plan, when the analytics aren't always going to favor you. The Dodgers are going to go ahead and still win that damn ballgame the way that they did in the short 2020 Mickey Mouse World Series season. Fast forward a couple years later, we cannot have that philosophy with how we're approaching things as a manager. That personally bothers me. I could get behind it a bit more if Marte did nothing this entire ball game. But that's just like the little cherry on top to everything that went wrong in this one. So let's talk about it now, everybody. I apologize. We're going to spend the next good amount of minutes rapid firing, breaking down everything that happened this ball game. So just sit back, relax. But if you're frustrated, then sit on the edge of your seat and go absolutely ham in the chat, spamming all the nonsense that you guys are going to spam. Either way, I appreciate you guys being in here. And let's start it off here with game one of the 6-5 loss, everybody, because there are notables here. And one of the key notes that I got to share here, any team could have won, but didn't. That is true, Fred. And I would have said the same thing if the Mets won, if it makes you feel any better. It has less to do about the Dodgers and more to do about the fact that I thought the 2020 season was an absolute joke, given the fact that we dealt with just a quarter of the year. I understood the circumstance. Doesn't mean I have to be in favor of it, however. Mario with a $10 haul. Thank you so much. Mario says, don't want a 2022 all over again. This team really needs to stop home run heroics. Focus on good at-bats, contact Hayne. Home runs will come. Don't rush. Also, I got 110 tip this past homestand from one guy. That's awesome, Mario. Thank you so much for spreading the wealth a little bit. I'm never going to complain about that. It's always appreciated. So wishing the best for you and your family, my man. And yeah, I don't think this is a 2022 situation that's happening right now. The Mets are just facing some of their early adversity here on the year, and that's what we're going to get into. Pat, thank you so much for the donation. So who replaces Winker? I bet McKinney. So the Mets are probably going to defer to someone like Brett Beatty and the farm if they don't consider maybe more of a DH option and John Singleton. McKinney could be considered. Drew Gilbert is also a guy that has his name in the ring that they could consider. Celestino, who's been solid in AAA so far, playing corner outfield, can also be considered. The Mets have guys that they can go to in the interim. So now let's break down this ball game, everybody, because I'm pretty frustrated. Okay. And also, everybody, one update, and I apologize. I know that I've been saying this for the past number of minutes, but more things keep happening as I'm talking. Brett Beatty had big toe soreness, which is why he hasn't played like the past 4 games for the Syracuse Mets. People have asked about that, but that is the answer behind it. So Beatty does not get the call, with Winker likely heading to the IL. That could be a reason why. So something to bear in mind. But all right, guys, game 1, Blade Tidwell is making his MLB debut, facing off against Eric Fetty, who right away, what did Eric Fetty look like today, everybody? Batting practice. Say it with me. Yes, he did. In the first inning, though, we would see Lindor strike out swinging. Soto with a flyout that we saw Lars Nootbaar deep to right field right away. Then we see the polar bear Pete Alonso rip his 12th double this season. Afterwards, Brandon Nimmo gets the party started with his 5th double of the year, driving in the Mets' first run of the ball game. Nimmo did a great job there to give the Mets an early 1-0 lead. Winker got on with a walk, but that's all she wrote there for the inning as Torrens would have lined out. Torrens started game 1 of the doubleheader. Alvarez started game 2. In the bottom of the first of game 1 of the 2-game doubleheader, everybody, Lars Nootbaar grounded out. Alec Burleson got on with a single. And then we saw a pass ball allow Burleson to get a second base, a quick pop out on Brendan Donovan, and then a key ground out there on Nolan Arenado, all played beautifully by Mr. Luis Angel Acuna, who got his first career start ever at third base. Another thing that I feel like is going to get lost from today's game, everybody, that I want to reiterate with each and every one of you. Luis Angel Acuna, for the first time, and mind you, this guy has played like 600 plus innings in his professional career, has never played a single inning at third base. Played third base in game 1 of the doubleheader today, and easily looks like the best defensive third base option the Mets have had in years. And this is not a slight on Vientos or Beatty, but rather a further appreciation because of how damn talented Luis Angel Acuna is. He drove right into the baseball, no hesitation. He did a great running throw there on Nolan Arenado. He did not skip a beat, and I'm sure Nolan, who's known for the Gold Glove heroics, had something to say about that, maybe saying tip of the cap, what have you. But Acuna looked fantastic when he was at third, but didn't stay the whole ball game because of Jesse Winker having to exit due to injury and then changing the defensive configuration a bit. But as we continue on, everybody, we see in the top of the second, Luis Angel Acuna gets the party started offensively with a single. Acuna always doing a great job there. And then we see nothing else transpire, unfortunately, as Ascar and Lindor are out back-to-back. To begin the bottom of the second, we would see Wilson Contreras is greeting Blade Tidwell brutally there with his 4th home run of the year. That goes opposite field. Blade Tidwell's first home run he's ever given up in his career there. It's a 1-1 tied ball game. Nolan Gorman gets on with a walk. Pedro Paje strikes out. That's the first strikeout that we would see of his career for Blade Tidwell. Victor Scott gets on with a single. Jose Barrero with a flyout, and then Lars Nootbaar would be called out on strikes, and a fantastic job there by Mr. Blade Tidwell throwing 98-mile-per-hour paint there down the pipe, and that does it there for a clean inning after giving up that home run. So it's tie ball game 1-1 as we head to the third in game 1 of our doubleheader breakdown today. Juan Soto gets the party started in the top of the third with a leadoff single. Alonso then rips his 13th double of the season, second of the day. And then after one out by BrandonYM, Jesse Winker would bring in another run and give the Mets a 2-1 lead as he would have himself a sacrifice fly. That would be the only thing Winker does in this ball game as he would exit with an apparent oblique injury. From there, everybody, we're going to get into a pass ball, allows Alonso to get a third. Terens gets on with a walk, so runners on the corners for Jeff McNeil, who pops out right away to end it. In the bottom of the third, we would see back-to-back singles with one out for Brendan Donovan and Nolan Arenado. Then after Donovan and Arenado get on base, Wilson Contreras gets on base with a single. Bases are loaded, unfortunately, for Blade Tidwell facing Nolan Gorman. Gorman ties the ball game with a fly out there on a sac fly that we would see flies into sacrifice double play, and that does it then for the inning, but not before the Cardinals tie up the ball game 2-2 through 3. As we then get on to the fourth, everybody, we would see Luis Angel Acuna get on with a walk. Jose Azcar would be called out on strikes. Acuna steals his 8th bag of the year. Some context to everybody. Luis Angel Acuna has stolen 8 of the 20 stolen bags or so, or 21 now, I think, because Marte had one in game 2. Out of the 21 stolen bags the Mets have had so far this season, Acuna has been the reason for 8 of them, helping him pave the way to why he was labeled NL Rookie of the Year, which is great to see. Nothing else transpired that any, unfortunately, as Juan Soto was called out on strikes, and this was very unfortunate. Back-to-back at-bats for Juan Soto, and the fourth and then I believe the 6th inning or so, that he would be called out on strike 3, bottom of the zone. Both of them didn't even touch the zone, were borderline, but didn't touch. And if the ABS system was in, that more than likely would have been an actual ball. So Soto having a tremendous eye at the plate. What is his demise, though, is situations like this where he's not even hacking away foul to try to get something more clear for a ball, because I thought that Soto would have learned his lesson out of how this umpire was an absolute piece of garbage in game 1 of the doubleheader today and wouldn't allow himself to be caught like that a second time to end the inning. But that was the case a couple innings later, and that did frustrate me because Soto, you have to be swinging there. That's a borderline strike, but that's absolutely something that he knows he can at least hack off to try and make things a little bit favorable for him, or a ball that's going to be more out of the zone. They're just not going to give you the calls that you're looking for, Soto, when it's that tight of a call there on strike 3 of the third out of the inning. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get those calls one way or another. And thank you guys again for chiming in live on a replay, folks, as we're breaking down the latest in Mets land. Mets lose their doubleheader today by a final score of 5-4 in the finale, and in game 1 was 6-5 was the finale. And as we continue on from here, folks, in the bottom of the fourth, we would see Pages pop out to third base. Victor Scott II, who was such a pest this entire series, felt like, against this Mets team. Robbing home runs, getting key hits, had himself a single there that was ripped to center. Barrero gets on with a hit by pitch. Lars Nootbaar flies out. Alec Burleson gets on with a walk, so it's bases loaded here yet again for Blade Tidwell, and Blade Tidwell unfortunately couldn't handle it. Brendan Donovan, the lefty batter, so great with his contact, a guy that obviously has been a pest against the Mets going back to the 4-game sweep the Mets had. He was still solid in that series. No less Donovan, who took advantage of Blade Tidwell's lack of comfortability against left-handed batters, rips himself a 2-out, 2-run single to make a 4-2 Cardinals. Then we would see Nolan Arenado get on with a walk, and then Wilson Contreras pokes a single there opposite field, continues the damage. 6-2 Cardinals lead, everybody, and that does it there for Blade Tidwell's final line. Blade is out of this ballgame after just 3.2 innings, 9 hits, 6 earned runs, 3 walks, 2 strikeouts, 1 home run. Not ideal, everybody, and that led to a less than impressive season debut for Blade Tidwell, but he did have some things of encouragement. Fastball touched 98, which was great. I did like the breaking ball that we saw, and you can definitely see that he has the talent and the makeup in his arsenal, but one, I think is going to profile better as a reliever. I've said that heading into the spring training to begin with, and secondly, he needs a bit more seasoning, especially against left-handed batters. We saw him get exposed today, and it wasn't shocking. It was kind of what I was fearing, and Blade Tidwell is now the first Mets starter this season to allow more than 4 earned runs. The Mets had the best in baseball and the 3rd longest streak in MLB history, I believe, entering today's game when it came to their starters not giving up more than 4 innings or 4 runs or less each and every start. Greg, thank you so much for the $5. I appreciate that. Don't mention this until you get to the 8th. Okay, I will wait till I get to the 8th. That's fine, Greg. Not a problem. As we get on to everybody, let's break this down further, because as we would see in the top of the 5th, Vientos gets on with a 1-out walk. That's all she wrote, though. At the bottom of the 5th, we would see there Pedro Pages, line out. Victor Scott, the second, ground out. Jose Barrero gets on with a single, and then Lars Nootbaar pops that. So Hanses Cabrera working over a scoreless inning of work Love to see that from Hanasis, who will be stepping up to be our Danny Young option now that Danny Young is no longer part of the team for the rest of the season, down with Tommy John surgery. Jeff McNeil gets on with a walk that we see there in the top of the 6th. Acuna rips another base knock, this time up the middle, his second or third hit of the game at this point. Then we would see Kyle Lee come in for Mr. Eric Fetty, whose day is done after giving up 3 earned runs on 5 innings. Mets should have did more than what they did there against Fetty, though. That really frustrated me. Then we see everybody, Francisco Lindor ground into a force out. It's a 6-3 ball game, so let's see what happens from there. And Juan Soto yet again is called out on a strike 3 call. Borderline call, bottom of the zone that doesn't go in the Mets' favor. Very frustrating. From there, we would see Nolan Arenado rip himself a 2-out single in the bottom of the 6th, and then here comes Huascar Brazoban to clean up the mess, and he does exactly that. He does hit Wilson Contreras first in the process, and then gets a called strike 3 on Nolan Gorman after, mind you, the second ball that he threw was a clear strike up and in that they called a ball because the ump was blind and missed it per usual. Then he gets a call a little bit more in his favor for the final strike call, and that's fine, making up for it. And that heads us to the top of the 7th, everybody, because in the top of the 7th, Brandon Nimmo gets on with a walk. And then we would see their Pedro Paez ground out. Victor Scott II with a walk. And then we would see Jose Barrero strikes out. Lars Nootbaar flies out, and that does it there for the inning. In the top of the 8th, Phil Maton comes in, and the Mets yet again know how to hit against their former soft-tossing right-hander. Torrens gets on with a walk. McNeil grounds into a force out. Acuna gets his 3rd hit of the ball game at this point. Tyrone Taylor comes in as a pinch hitter for Jose Oscar, and he gets a single right away. Tyrone Taylor is playing great baseball right now, and that can be understated. He got on base almost every single time all day long in this doubleheader, and he deserves credit for that. Taylor was not the problem. He was in favor of good things trying to happen. Lindor then rips a single, everybody, and this will be a huge hit for Mr. Smile, as this makes it a 1-run ball game with 2 outs. Fantastic job there by Francisco Lindor with the clutch hitting. Unfortunately, the Mets weren't able to get more done there, and I apologize. That was 1 out, not 2. 6-5. Jojo Romero then comes in to face Juan Soto. He walks Juan Soto. Then the polar bear and Pete Alonso is called out on strike 3, when, mind you, very frustrating call on the forefront when you're watching the game live. You're thinking it's not even close. It's not touching the zone. That's a completely botched call there by the umpire. I, like you, thought that exact same way. Upon after review, however, if this was an ABS system where the Mets could have challenged that, it would have been a called strike 3 because it did dot the bottom outside corner. Perfectly placed slider there that just ran on him there. And unfortunate, but there's really nothing you could do. And that's something where I can't fault Alonso at all for not taking the bat off his shoulders, because that was a pitch that really didn't look like it was going to even touch the zone, and it did right at the very end. Have to tip the cap. It was a great slider, and that's all there is to it. And then Brandon Nimmo flies up, because of course he does, and the Mets strand, bases loaded there in the 8th inning, everybody. And that goes back to the donation from earlier from my guy who said wait till the 8th inning. Alonso had a great at-bat. It was a questionable call, and this is one of those things where many of umpires would have gave Alonso the call there. He didn't get it today, especially being in St. Louis, not overly shocked by that. But you also have to remember that when looking at it actually through MLB.com or Baseball Savant, it did nick the bottom corner. So we can sit here all we want and say that, oh, that wasn't a strike 3. It was a strike 3, and it would have been called a strike 3 if we had the challenge system go out of our way to try to show it. So as we go on from here, everybody, in the bottom of the 8th, Mets are down by a run, 6-5. Reed Garrett comes in. He replaces Austin Warren, who I forgot to mention. Austin Warren was just absolutely nails in his Mets debut today. Warren, who did stay on the team today, initially was sent down, but because they need an extra guy for the 27th man on the roster, he stayed as a reliever, pitched in Game 1, didn't pitch in Game 2, and that's fine. Austin Warren had himself a nice pick that we saw at first. A toss by Alonso that got in the dirt slightly, but he was able to make the nice play, which I'd love to see. And Warren was fine, so we'll see if the Mets consider him for a reliever role again. Reed Garrett came in. Reed did his job, got out of an inning unscathed there that we saw. Then that led us to the 9th inning, everybody. And in the 9th inning, facing Ryan Helsley, the flamethrower, Mark Vientos gets on with a single up the middle that we see. Mets have a leadoff base runner. They're trying to get something cooking. And here comes then Starling Marte, who's pinched hit there. Starling Marte, who comes in to pinch hit for Mark Vientos. And then we would see Torrens, however, strikes out. So I am actually very confused. Okay, Marte came in a pinch run for Vientos. That's correct. And then he went and stole the bag as well. We got there on wild pitch, rather. But Torrens strikes out swinging, and then McNeil lines out, and that does it there for Game 1 of the doubleheader, folks. And this is the key context. This is the key context that we can't forget. The Mets were 3 for 12, everybody. 3 for refereeing 12 today. And I got to get this one hair that's in my face driving me up a wall. 3 for 12 with runners in scoring position and left 12 on base in Game 1. That is a recipe for failure, and that right there is why you lost the ball game. There's nothing else to it, okay? Regardless on how much the umpire was an absolute shit show, and regardless on some of the defensive web gems, you have to produce there more if you're this Mets team. And how many games have I said to you guys, and I truly mean every single game, it feels like for the past number of weeks, really since the season has started, that win, lose, or draw, this Mets team only has 1 to 3 hits with runners to scoring position, and it has at least 10 in set position, if not 10, 12, 15, 20. It's absurd. And just to make sure that I don't miss anything from my notes from earlier, everybody, because I just want to double check here, to rehash from game 1, my key takeaways. The umpire was on full display on doing the ump show, and it was a shit show. Tidwell obviously showed upside, but clearly showed why he's not a major league pitcher yet either. And while it's unfortunate, again, he also needs that reality check, and we do too, to make sure that we don't go out of our way to necessarily put him in that situation when he's not ready going forward. We did see Alonso continue to spread for all fields. That is something to make note, because not only did he have himself quality hits in that game 1, and we'll get to game 2 with his production in a second, but Alonso was able to continue to hit for power opposite field, going gap to gap, right center field, down the first baseline, you name it. Alonso's looking fantastic on that front. Also, Vientos, again, I love Mark to death, but we're still having some frustrating at-bats, and that's an understatement, especially when you have him batting 4th or 5th. You need more production there. And when we look at this Mets lineup in game 1 entirely, everybody, Luis Angel Acuna went 3 for 4 and got on base 4 times. He was tremendous. Alonso got on base 2 times. Lindor had 3 RBIs, so that makes up for the lack of getting on bases consistently. But then when we look at Nimmo, Winker, that 4-5 spot for game 1, the Mets get a total of 2 RBIs out of, but a lack of hitting with runners in scoring position, with the exception of Winker's sac fly, because he does deserve credit for that. On the pitching end, we relayed everything there, so now let's get on to game 2 of this series, everybody. But actually, final thing I'll say is the Mets were smoking so many baseballs. Luis Angel Acuna had his hardest hit baseball of his career today at 110 exit velocity. Hardest hit baseball he's ever done, and that was a single there for Acuna, just for some context. We also look at Luis Torrens, had a 106-mile-per-hour line out today. We saw any other ones that were frustrating. Brandon Nimmo had a 101 ground out. We saw Jeff McNeil had a 99-mile-per-hour line out. We saw Nimmo had a 97-mile-per-hour fly out. So, again, a lot of hard-hit baseballs. And as we get into game 2 of this doubleheader, let me just reiterate how many baseballs the Mets hit hard that did not lead to a hit. Brandon Nimmo, everybody, had 99 exit velo on a flyout. Then we see Mark Vientos, 105 for a ground out. Then we see Juan Soto. Okay, I'm clicking on the wrong thing here. Let me get the context of just the fastest guys here on exit velocity. Okay. Oh my, this is ridiculous. Alonso's double play ball in game 2, and I don't know why this thing has to glitch on me. His double play ball in game 2, roughly 113 miles per hour. Absolutely absurd. He smoked the baseball. I know Nimmo smoked one for a lineout, 107 miles. And also, Nimmo's 107 mile per hour lineout that we'll get into in a second had a 630 expected batting average. Alonso's double play ball at 113 miles per hour, 520 expected batting average. Francisco Lindor ground out, 108 miles per hour. Expected batting average, 460. Tyrone Taylor thankfully had a single at 108, and that was a 570, so it makes sense why that one finally went through. Vientos, we saw there with a 105 ground out, but that was not expected because he's so slow. Going down the list here, another line out there. Oh my God. Lindor had another line out on this one at 102 miles per hour with a 640 expected batting average. Just robbery, left, right, and center is what happened to this Mets team. Starling Marte, it's just so frustrating to look at these numbers. They got absolutely screwed today. In every facet, between the umpire, to the defense, to the Mets not hitting a lick with runners in scoring position, this was a day from hell as a Mets fan on this fine Sunday. Mickey, yeah, my man. Wardy, my brother. These games was rough, yes, but for me, the manager is who to blame for these losses, and so far, almost every loss that I think is questionable moves on him. You can blame Mendoza to a degree with certain decisions, especially with like the previous series and the lack of utilization for Edwin Diaz. I wholeheartedly agree with you there. But this still comes down to the Mets' situational hitting, and they're still not hitting the way that they need to. Now, how much pressure do you want to put on Carlos Mendoza for the lineup configuration when It's a collective problem, 1 through 9 in the lineup, that they're not consistently hitting here the way that they should be with runners in scoring positions. So let's get on now, everybody, to what happened in Game 2 of this doubleheader that led to the Mets' 5-4 loss. More frustrating than the first game today, which is saying a lot because the first game was very frustrating. Give me 1 second, everybody. Going to blow my nose quick because allergy season is upon us. All right, guys, let's get this party started. Game 2, Mets lose 5-4. How did we get here? Between having on the bump Tyler McGill and Palante there, Andre Palante for the Cardinals. It starts in the first where Lindor grounds out right away. Then Soto's first at bat of the day, he gets on with a single. So not a problem for the one and only Juan Soto. Thank you guys kindly for smashing like and subscribe on as you chime in as we're breaking down all the latest in Mets land as they lose their latest series and drop a second consecutive series now, this time to the St. Louis Cardinals by a final score of 6-5 and then 5-4. More one-run losses for the Mets. So you want to know the worst part, everybody? A little tangent here. The Boston Red Sox are 18-18 on the season. The Red Sox have lost half their games this year by 1 run. I'm doing the math in my head. The Mets have lost the vast majority of their games this year by 1 run. There's been only 1 game this season that the Mets lost in more of a blowout fashion, and that was the 5-0 loss against the Marlins for the final game in their first homestand that I was sadly in attendance for. Outside that, the Mets have been in 1 or 2 run ball games, if I'm not mistaken, for pretty much every other loss that they've had so far this season. So they're right up there when it comes to staying in the thick of it until the very end. But the great problem that we find ourselves having is, again, that situational hitting is just not getting the job done. It is literally happening every single game to this Mets team. They're either winning greatly or they're losing in a very dramatic, frustrating fashion, and I prefer that over blowouts because it shows me that the boys are close, but at the same time, it's frustrating to see them lose these games when you know they were so close to having it, and now we're 4-6 in our past 10 games, which is not ideal. Not ideal whatsoever. Marvelous May has been a miserable May here throughout the first 4 days of the month of May. And I know I'm being very nitpicky. It's early on. But again, bar was very high after the month of April. So naturally, we're due for some regression and a lot more frustration. Would rather lose 5-0 than 5-4 type games. I used to be the same way, JTB, but as my mindset has changed over the years as a content creator and a baseball fan, I prefer to lose the tight games, not because I enjoy them. They're more frustrating from a fan point of view, but usually when you lose close ball games, it means that, again, you're right there. You know, it's more deflating to a degree when you're losing games in blowout fashion where the team just doesn't show any sign of life, whether because the pitching gets rocked early, they don't know how to bounce back from it, or the offense just isn't there from start to finish. D-Mac, thank you so much for the $5 holla. Why Ascar in for Marte and not McNeil? The Mets didn't bring in McNeil for a reason, obviously. You can ask Carlos Mendoza because I don't really have the answer for you. They just liked Ascar based on the matchup and didn't go in their favor. I appreciate the donation, though. Thank you so much for that. And also, I can't even say it's because of the fact that they want McNeil to not play both games health-wise, but I mean, Ascar ended up playing both games too. So it's like, what's the difference here? I digress, everybody. After Soto rips a 1-out single to kickstart Game 2 of this doubleheader where the Mets lost 5-4, we would see Alonso ground into a double play, and that does it. In the bottom of the first, Tyler McGill with a 1-2-3 quick inning on Lars Nootbaar, Mason Wynn, and Brendan Donovan. In the top of the second, we would see Mark Vientos rip an opposite field base knock for his first hit of the day. And Vientos has now hits in his back-to-back at-bats, going from a continuation from Game 1, if I'm not mistaken, because he came in later in the ball game there as they shifted things defensively, because once Winker was pulled from the ball game in Game 1, they put Vientos at third, they put Acuna at second, and then I want to say they put McNeil in the left field. And if I'm, because they replaced him there with a Winker. Marte, everybody, would get on with a single there, so they would have 1 on with 2 out for Starling Marte, who then steals his 3rd base of the year. Alvarez gets on with a walk, and Luis Angel Acuna unfortunately grounds out to end in the bottom of the second. Then we see Nolan Arenado rip a leadoff single in the bottom of the second. Then it becomes a 2-0 Cardinals lead as Alec Burleson rips his first home run of the year. Middle pitch by Tyler McGill. Sayonara, it's out of here, and it's a 2-0 Cardinals lead. The Mets would rally back, but they would still fall short in the end. Jordan Walker strikes out to end the inning from there. And Tyrone Taylor leads off the third handsomely with a single that he rips to the left. Then we get Francisco Lindor with a single. Soto grounds out, having runners out the corners with 1 out. Alonso drives on a run with an RBI single, which we love from the Polar Bear, everybody. And that is why Pete Alonso is our offensive standout of the day. You know, you could give it to Starling Marte. You could give it a little bit to Nimmo from first game if you want. You could even give it to Mr. Luis Angel Acuna because he got on base so much. And part of the reason why I didn't is just because I really couldn't find enough highlights for Acuna today. Sadly, they weren't clipping them enough. But I'm going to go with the Polar Bear because even though Pete still didn't have as many as good at-bats in this game 2 as he did in game 1, he's just Pete. Like every single game, Alonso is doing what we need him to do for the most part. A 3-for-9 day, 2 doubles, an RBI, a 344 average, and still well over 1,000 OPS. That is some fantastic numbers there from Pete Alonso. Not going to complain whatsoever. So while there weren't many guys to look out for a potential standout today between games 1 and 2, I am going to give the Polar Bear Pete Alonso to fall in that category after having himself a rock-solid day at the plate yet again, the way that he showcased to everybody. And I would love to hear from you Mets fans on a scale of 1 to 10. How impressed have you been with the Polar Bear and Pete Alonso this season, now having yet another productive day at the plate, having tremendous command out of that strike zone there, poking one opposite field, going gap to gap, pulling a baseball. Alonso's doing everything and anything, and I am absolutely obsessed with what has been a great month plus of the season that he's had to this point, everybody. Let me hear in the chat, in the comments down below, how are we feeling about the Polar Bear after another productive day? Just unfortunate that comes in back-to-back losses, the way that the Mets faltered in this one. As we continue on, everybody, let's get back over here and get into it. Mets have themselves then, just like that, a 2-1 New York Metropolitan lead. Mark Vientos would get on with a walk, Nimmo would strike out, and Marte would give the Mets a further lead and would be expanded even more as Marte pokes one that we would see there for a 2-out, a 2-out RBI single. Did I say a 2-run single? I apologize if I said that earlier, but the Mets have themselves a 3-2 lead there. No, it was 2 runs. That's right, because Alonso gave the Mets the first run of the ballgame when they were losing 2-1. Then Marte had himself the great 2-out heading that we saw to make it 3-2 Mets. And then Francisco Alvarez, working with 2 outs himself, makes it 4-2 Mets with an RBI single. Alvarez, who had a gorgeous 3-for-5 game, his last game for the Mets 48 hours ago there because it was pre-rain delay. It was game 1 of the series against the Cardinals. Now Alvarez, fast forward to today, looking rock solid yet again here that we see with a great productive line. Love to see that from Alvarez. Unfortunately, we didn't get any more, though. Jared Young call up for Jesse Winker. It is possible that Young could be the call-up option for the Mets on the interim, especially if they just want someone that they think will be up short-term versus like Drew Gilbert. I know fans would like to see, but I'd be surprised, I think, if it happened. Right as of right now, I think they're going to want more seasoning for Drew personally. But as we continue on, everybody, Acuna would be the final out of the inning as he grounds out. And then we have the bottom of the third where Lars Newbar gets on with a 1-out walk. Mason Wynn gets on with a walk. Then we see Nolan Arenado rip himself. Just pisses me off looking at it still. Giving the Cardinals a 1-run deficit to the Mets with an RBI single on a ground ball to Vientos that we saw there. Afterwards, Contreras with an RBI tied the ball game 4-4. Wilson killing the Mets in this series because of course he is. Then we see Burleson ground out for the final out in the inning. Tyrone Taylor then leads off yet another inning with a single, this time in the 4th. Lindor gets on with a walk. Soto flies out. What should have been a 3-run home run was absolute robbery by Victor Scott II there at center field. That is 1,000% the reason why the Mets wouldn't win this game, in part because you had Juan Soto having a tremendous at-bat. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Completely hit that baseball well, but Victor Scott timed his catch beautifully. A gorgeous snag in center that did, in fact, rob a home run. This is not like how some people were saying Brandon Nimmo robbed a home run the other day when he didn't. It was always going to stay in the park. No, this was a ball that if Juan Soto actually got it through, it wouldn't have stayed in the park. It would have been a dead center 3-run shot that I was so hoping to see. Was preaching for a home run. I was literally saying it to my family as I'm watching this. I'm like, Soto homer time, Soto homer time, Soto homer time, saying that verbatim. And then bam, he gets robbed by Victor Scott because of course he does. The baseball guys were just not on the Mets side today, to put it lightly. Alonso then with a walk. Then after that, that does it as Nimmo lines out on what should have been a hit. Again, this was a 108 scorcher to right that Jordan Walker somehow corrals. That does it there for the 4th. In the bottom of the 4th, nothing transpires besides a Victor Scott walk. Then we would see in the 5th, everybody, Alvarez would have walk, Tyrone Taylor would have hit by pitch, so 2-on, 2-out for Francisco Lindor, and he strikes out swinging. Unfortunate there. In the bottom of the 5th, we would see no one transpire to get on to score outside of Brendan Donovan getting on with a hit by pitch. Then the 6th, we would see Mark Vientos rip a 2-out single, but nothing more. That is another hit opposite field there that we would see, or center opposite field there to Victor Scott. Then we see everybody in the bottom of the 6th. Offense happens for the Cardinals, and they take the lead. Victor Scott the second, the same schmuck who robbed Juan Soto of a 3-run bomb, has himself his 6th double of the season and gives the Cardinals a 5-4 lead. And that does it there for the 6th, which then leads us to the 7th, where Luis Angel Acuna strikes out for the final out in the inning. Acuna had a bad game versus a great first game of the day, and that's going to happen. Donovan with a 1-out single. Then we see Wilson Contreras strikes out Sweeney, and Burleson flies out, and that does it for Ryan Stanek, who comes in for Max Kranick. After Max Kranick had himself a fine day today, did allow the 1 earned run, but again, I'm not going to fault Kranick, as I'm really faulting more on this Mets offense for not hitting in great situational options that they have there to drive in runs with runners in scoring position. In the 8th inning, the Mets do nothing. Juan Soto pops out to end it. Nolan Arenado makes a ridiculous catch there that falls into the stands, into the netting on the third base side. Then we get to the bottom of the 8th as Edwin Diaz comes in, and we would see him give up a leadoff single to Pozo, the catcher, a line out there to Walker, a called strike 3 on Victor Scott, 2-out double to Lars Nootbaar, and then a ground out on Jose Barrero for a clean inning of work for his first outing in 8 days or so. Then Alonso strikes out, Vientos grounds out, and Nimmo flies out, and that does it for the ball game. Mets in game 2, where they lose by a final score of 5-4. They are 3 for 11 with runners in scoring position, and they left 10 on base. Totaling, the Mets had how many on base today? 22. 22 they left on base today. Just the ones they left on base, everybody. Not guys they had on base entirely, but just guys they left on base alone. 22 between games 1 and 2 today. So, yes, the defense absolutely robbed the Mets in game 2. Yes, the umpire was a piece of garbage in game 1 and screwed the Mets on one specific call, I believe, on Juan Soto in game 2 on a fastball way up, completely out of the zone that they called a strike. And I'm going to show you guys this because the ump show is horrendous. So, for context, everybody, here was the first horrendous call that we saw earlier in this ball game. And at the time, I want to say it was on Acuna there in the 9th inning. Take a look at this, everybody. You see how that red ball is not even anywhere close to the effing strike zone? It's almost like you could have been Helen Keller made that same call, because it isn't all that difficult to just be wrong all the time. Shout out to the umpire for being a piece of shit per usual. Then we get on to game 2 of the doubleheader. And here is a call. I want to say this was on Soto because it was from the left side. Does that look like a strike to you guys? You tell me. You tell me. To me, that looks like a full 2 balls out of the effing zone upstairs. Just like the fact that we just blatantly call these things is insane to me. Like, absolutely insane that this shit still happens on a nightly basis. Like, how? I can't wait for when the ABS system is officially in and they can challenge strikes as much as they possibly can. Because these umpires need to be held accountable. The union needs to stop having their back with everything. I understand why, because it's a union, but also F them, because umpires get things wrong so much all the time. And while they have a very tasking job, I'm not saying it's easy, at the end of the day, this is a results-oriented business. And if you're going to factor into the results of the ball game that was paid for by not hundreds, but thousands of fans to attend each and every game to get screwed by a call that you decide to make because you want to be more about yourself than actually what the game should be. No, that shit cannot be flying anymore. So I really look forward to when we can start calling these strikes at the major league level, not just in the minor leagues, not just in spring training. We need robo umps yesterday. Because here's the thing. It's not even a situation where it's like, oh, well, if we bring in the robo-umps, we're not going to have any true human feel of the game. You're still going to have the umpires, guys. They're just not going to be able to get away with the same bullshit that they usually get away with. So now, no different as well than, like, say, when you want to challenge a foul and say the NBA. Like, let's put our Tom Thibodeau hat on. We're the Knicks right now, right? We're trying to challenge a play there late in the fourth quarter with 30 seconds left. Challengeable play, makes sense. Poor foul call there when it wasn't actually foul. Or even when Brunson had it overturned and everyone was calling him flopper, regardless on if you think he's a flopper or not. You know, that was a prime example of a situation where poor call initially, it's challenged, and it's reversed. I can't wait for that to be a continued thing at the Major League Baseball level. So while it may slow the game down a bit, I'm okay allowing the game to slow down when baseball is not supposed to be a fast sport to begin with. You know, true baseball fans weren't praying and dying for baseball games to be faster. The average fan wasn't. Because if you are a true baseball fan, you appreciate the ebbs and flows of the game, the ebbs and flows of the 162, and the pace that comes along with it. By bringing back the implementation now of the robo-umps outside of spring training and minor leagues, but this time at the major league level, hopefully starting next season or so, you're finally setting yourself in a position where even if that adds, say, north of 10 more minutes on an average game, that could be a huge difference maker in actually getting calls right versus wrong and being the differentiator in how a team goes about their game outcome. Like, that can be a real thing, because I'm absolutely sick and tired of umpires having all their hands on things just to screw this Mets team in the end, just like a lot of other teams get screwed each and every year. You and I both, Eugene. I want them to both be accurate too. Unfortunately, it feels like that's a very tall task to ask nowadays, as much as it frustrates me to say. I do have some more updates to share with each and every one of you, though, before we get out of here, everybody, because I'm not going to be too long-winded today, especially when we lost a doubleheader on a Sunday. Pisses me off enough, and tomorrow we're going to have a very long day on the platform tomorrow. This West Coast trip is going to kick Wardy's butt, because we're probably going to do pregame. We'll have postgame, obviously, but these 9:40 games are going to have my schedule so unbelievably messed up for the next number of days. So just apologies in advance, guys, if I'm a little more out of sorts than usual, as I usually stay up very late to begin with, and I have to get up early then when I'm on dad duty a lot of the time. But at the same time, it doesn't make it any easier when we're now incentivized to stay up later because we got to watch these West Coast games. All I pray and ask is that the Mets just show up against the Diamondbacks and do not drop another series against them, because these games matter, especially the Mets are, for the first time in a hot minute, less than 10 games above 500 because they're 22-13 now, I believe, and would be nothing better than to pounce on what is a depleted, taxed bullpen right now and the Diamondbacks. No Corbin Burns for the series because Burns was just placed on the injured list, I believe, with shoulder inflammation. So there is a lot of opportunity for the Mets to go out here and make a difference in Arizona. So hopefully they give us a reason to stay up as late as we're going to. Steve, I usually do the nap earlier in the day, but I get what you're saying for sure. I have a question on your thought. Since we got Alvarez back, our pitching has been the same, it seems. I'm crazy in that correlation. I know pitchers got to pitch, but Alvy helps call games. You know, Alvy has not been the problem with calling games. You're connecting Alvarez with the bullpen woes happening at the same time because that needs to be exposed, right? Danny Young and AJ Minter went down right around the same time that McNeil and Alvarez came back from injury. And what is another commonality that we're seeing? Whether it is because of bad fundies, umpire, not hitting liquid runners in scoring position, whatever the reason is, here's the fact, folks. The Mets have not been well on the road so far this year. At home, they've been nails. But on the road, they are a below 500 team. And that's something that obviously we don't love to say while it's early in the season. You know things can change fast. But the Mets have had their early woes we've noticed here on the road. They just have not been able to pull out the wins enough. And I have a theory. I have a key take that I would love for you guys to hear because I think it holds true to a degree. Not that it is the end-all be-all, but I think it's a factor to consider, and I would like to hear everybody's thoughts. Not having the Citi Field crowd of 35 to 40,000 roaring fans on a nightly basis hurts this Mets team down the stretch in the clutch. How can it not? What was the one thing the Mets did so well in their homestand so far this season that we've noticed? It's their ability to thrive with the fans behind them. Very emotional baseball team. You can clearly tell they are not riding too high, too low, but when they ride high, they're really riding high. We see that. And they made it known how much they thrive off of the fans and how much it really gets them going and how much they factor into their production. So my early Wardy take is this. Whether it means everything or nothing to you, and that's fine, I'm going to say it. Being on the road and not having the home crowd to the same extent is unintentionally throwing the boys off when they're getting into crunch time and these road games. Because it's a simple connection that you guys see here from how they perform so well at home when you've had basically sold out crowds so far this season. Whereas when you're going on the road in DC, when yes, you still get a good contingent of Mets fans. I'm not saying you don't, but it's still not the same. Same thing as obviously when you're going there, St. Louis, what'll be Arizona starting tomorrow, wherever you are. It just isn't the same exact feel. And I am curious how much, if at all, that has factored into the Mets' mentality and their way of thinking, specifically down the stretch in the ball game, like when they have to clutch up and try to rally all the way back or to get a lead, whatever it's going to be. Let's see. Left on base can be misleading. Better stat is percentage of left on base. That's fine, too. We can look at the percentage of left on base in this one. I don't mind. I don't know if they have that in the MLB app, or if I'll have to go through like Savant or somewhere else for that, though. Let's just see real quick. Let's see. Bad Funny is oh yeah, I know D-Mac. Yep. Mets are 6 and on base, so of course we're gonna have a lot of. That's true. That's true. But that kind of proves my point, though, Zach. Like you're actively proving my point. The Mets get on base a shit ton. They get on base a lot, almost every single inning, and yet they still couldn't win these games, and they dropped them both by a run. That's my entire point, though. It's like they're getting guys on base at a great clip. Greater clip than we've seen consistently than really in years before. Last year, they got guys on base at a great clip from throughout the entire summer when they went on their run, but that was that. What has been the commonality that we have seen? It's that they've gone on base a lot every single inning, every single game, but they have not been able to drive in so many runs when they've had them in scoring position. So many runs. And that'll continue to be this team's main Achilles heel until something changes. It's really hard to see it being otherwise. But folks, I am going to get out of here in just a minute. But before I do, let me make sure I don't miss anything on the updates to share with each and every one of you. And then we will go from there. Not seeing anything, just people kind of debating already who they want to be called up because Jesse Winker's going on the IL. Marte's okay, which is good. But I'll say this, with Winker going on the IL, I think it makes a lot more sense to be calling up a lefty bat. So whether that is, again, Jared Young, if he's a lefty bat, if I'm not mistaken, Brett Beatty healthy and they like him, even though that by having Beatty, it would mean that you'd have McNeil more in the outfield than anything else, which if the Mets are comfortable with, then so be it. Or if it's going to be a guy like Drew Gilbert, who obviously has exciting upside, but it's like at the same time, why are you going to call him up to have him in a very limited sample size too? It might be a little premature for that. So, folks, that is what I'm going to leave you with. This was a long-winded, very frustrating post-game show here on this Sunday, and we will have a video dropping tomorrow earlier in the day for each and every one of you to check out our further reactions, thoughts, and analysis from not only the key takeaways from the series, but more so on what is next for the Mets, what key roster decisions upcoming, the latest on the farm, as well as what we can look ahead and previewing in their 3-game set beginning tomorrow against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So thank you guys again so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you guys are watching this,